most functional, I'll use the word functional parliamentary systems of the world. Because in many countries we have parliaments in name and in statute, but many of them are not really undertaking legislative processes, pre-legislative, legislative, post-legislative, in a very systematic, scientific or analytical way. And legislation in itself is a fascinating subject. In Pakistan's parliament, we have not been examining two elements in our legislative history so far. One, the pre-legislative, and one, the post-legislative. The pre-legislative, basically, the bills that we have moved, that most of the legislation which has been passed in Pakistan, I think we've got about 800 approximately laws in the books. Many of the rules which are supposed to automatically flow after laws have actually been passed, many laws are never passed after several years have passed. So one of the major reasons in which the Honorable Lodi Saab here, who's a man with a very sound judicial background at different places, he, along with many of us legislators, got our heads together that how can we make the legislative process in Pakistan a little more, which can impact on the life of the citizens of this country. The whole purpose of legislation is not to pass laws, but to improve the standards of living of the people, to upscale the quality of life, and to provide an element of spirit of rule of law through enactments in laws, statutes in Parliament. The essence of good governance, what in the modern term we call good governance, in the old days we used to say good government. So these are words of nuance we keep on changing. Not me, but mostly it's the international community. So from that point of view, I think this post-legislative scrutiny on which I'll just speak not for long, maybe 15 minutes, we find that like having rules, and now after we have moved our bills on making of rules in our assembly, we are getting, not directly but indirectly, a lot of psychological opposition to it. Because when you don't make rules, you can have a lot of leeway of discretion. And we all love discretion. Discretion empowers us. It adds to our executive power. It adds to our ability to do things which normally under the law we should not be doing. Because they are in that grey area. They're neither white nor black, but in between. So it's very difficult to check those not always very transparent ways of exercising executive power and authority. So when the rules are actually put on paper, which are in consonance with the legislation, then after say 3 years or so, I think it will enhance the legislature's primary authority of lawmaking if after 3 years they start examining the laws they had passed 3 years earlier. It will give them a new or a second look at how those laws have actually been executed, implemented on the ground, and whether they have served the purpose for which the law was passed. So this is basically the essence of post-legislative scrutiny, is to examine, is to overall assess, evaluate how that law has actually impacted the society after it has been launched, for which purpose that law was passed, and how has the society dealt with it. I think this happens in other countries. I've got about 6 countries: Canada, where it says that despite the fact the Privy Council's Office Guide to Making Federal Acts and Regulations suggests that the sunset clauses, mandatory review provision should be used sparingly, research has shown that there is no one model for review provisions in the Canadian legislation. Review provisions can vary in a number of different aspects, including timing and frequency of reviews, who performs the reviews, scope of the review, who considers the review once it has been completed, whether the review is mandatory or optional, whether some form of public consultation that must take place. The important part is public consultation. At this stage of the review, you can involve the public. After all, we represent the constituencies, we represent the people, we represent the stakeholders. Constitution protects the citizens, and the whole chapter on fundamental rights is to protect the weak. The whole purpose, as is the Charter of the Human Rights in the United Nations.